Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. A lot of old faces, a lot of new faces, which is great to see. I want to thank Sally and Eddie Cohen for opening up their home to us. Today's class, Leilu Nishmat Yeshaya ben Laura. Hashem should bless the Sack and Cohen families with many years of health, prosperity, success, and only good things. Amen. I like to begin. Of course, everybody knows we like to open up some conversations and talk because it's not going to be me the whole time. I want to begin by just sharing with you an idea regarding education that as a teacher, or granted a young teacher, only a few years in, I've had the ability to experience both, and we have a number of educators here, so I'm hoping that they'll share their insights as well, about two types of class structures that exist in school. Sometimes when we break down students and we put them in a classroom, we do it by, and I'm saying this broadly, by one of two ways. We could do what's called a homogeneous class, or we could do what's called a heterogeneous class. And what that means is if we say a homogeneous class, it means that we tend to group the students together based on level, ability, and skill. So homogeneous meaning they're all from a similar type of skill. We might call it, in other words, tracking. So we'll track students based on level and ability. This usually happens as the students get older and we start to see, where their strengths and weaknesses are. So, if you want to call it honors and then middle track and whatever names different schools and groupings give to it, they're grouping students based on skill and ability. That's one way of grouping students in a classroom. Another way of grouping them is heterogeneous, is not looking necessarily at a student's skills and just kind of grouping them together from all different reasons, maybe randomly, maybe socially, emotionally. There may be a whole different other set of factors that would cause us to group them together. I had the privilege, I taught, my first job was in Pirke Yeshiva for about 3 years. Then I moved over here and I was able to teach. Now I'm going into my 4th year at Hillel. And it happens to be that Hillel and Pirke, at least at the times that I taught there, have different structures based on different things. This is at least when I taught there. I don't want to say what they have now, because maybe it shows. Right. So exactly. So when I taught in Pirke, by necessity, and again, I'm not speaking bad or good about anything. I'm just telling you that what I experienced. This is just my experiences. In Pirke, we had a heterogeneous class. And most of that was because the school was a smaller school. So there was only a certain number of students per grade. So you had to put everybody together in the same class. And so we taught in a heterogeneous model. When I moved over here to Hillel, the school is a little bit bigger than Pirke was. So we're able to track. And the method that the school has chosen was to do a homogeneous style. So I don't want to say what's better or worse. I think each has positives and negatives. What I'd like to throw out is what are some of the ways that one style or the other, what are some of its positives and challenges for each of them, right? Let's start with a class that's tracked, like honors, non-honors, whatever you want to call it, a homogeneous class. What are the positives and negatives that go into that type of a class structure? Thoughts? I mean, you're all parents, so you've gone through this. Yes.
Capable of this track. So it could work both directions. That if they're in the lower track, they feel like, oh, I can never get to the higher track. But if they're in the higher track, they feel like I can do this. They have a harder work ethic. That it takes, they put more into it because they know that they can do it.
Right.
And then as far as
so that you'll say that's neither like positive or negative. It might be positive for one student, maybe negative for another student, but it kind of gives a student a certain level of motivation when they're in the higher track to want to excel, is what you're saying.
Right. The lower track can also try to excel to get to the higher track.
Okay, so maybe it offers motivation to want to move up. I remember when I was in Camp David as a camper. So in the camp, they when for swimming, right? They always put you in a certain pool, right? I mean, that makes sense. You don't want to put someone in a gigantic pool when they don't know how to swim. And I remember we used to be like, they used to give the pools names. So it was the guppies and I don't know, whatever else it was. And then and then the number 6 was the dolphins. And there were like 4 kids who were in dolphins with Rick the lifeguard. And everybody, the whole summer, your goal was, can I move up to dolphins? I want everyone supposed to get up to dolphins. If you got up to, and you worked the whole summer, you jumped into the freezing cold ice pool at 9 a.m. because you just wanted to get up there into dolphins. Okay, so it has the ability to motivate maybe on both sides. What were you going to say?
get to their.
So teachers have a better sense of, in a homogeneous class, where the students are at, and as a result, they know how to tailor their lessons to be able to help those students grow. Excellent. Other thoughts on either side? Yes.
Just like about the teacher, I feel like it needs to be a certain type of teacher to make sure that the whole class don't set too low expectations
Okay.
for them. Like in order to keep everybody growing.
Right. So invariably what sometimes can happen, right, is that when you track people based on skill ability, some of the lower skilled students might get pushed aside. Maybe they don't get the best quality teachers, maybe don't get emphasized as much. Maybe the teachers kind of lower the standards too much for them and therefore they don't end up growing, right? So you have to have a teacher who understands how to relate to those types of students for sure. Michelle, yes. Expert teacher, yes. Go ahead.
Also, there are definitely pros and cons both ways. Life is not track. So if you're trying to mimic the real world and the skills that kids are going to need, they're going to go into the workforce and have to live in the real world. There are people of different skill levels all across the board in everything you're going to encounter in life. So you need to learn to work with people of different skill levels and who have different strengths and different weaknesses.
That's a great point, right? So maybe if we want our education system to mirror what life is going to be like, maybe a heterogeneous model makes a little bit more sense because it allows students within the classroom, the stronger students and weaker students, to learn how to relate to each other. If your whole life you've always been in one track, whether up or down, so then you only learn how to relate to those types of people, and as a result, you're maybe behind the eight ball when it comes to dealing with others. Other things? Yes.
Mix and then high school.
Right. So sometimes we make differentiations when it comes to age groups. Younger we do mixed, and then older we start to track. I think happens to be, I don't know, and my experience in Hillel Middle School, they're starting to track more and more, like with Gemara. Certain subjects start to become also. So sometimes they won't do a homogeneous model across the board, but let's say like Gemara, which is a very challenging subject, they might separate by levels, or math, they might separate by levels. And then other classes like English or social studies or science, they might not. So every school has to figure out where that is. So some take maybe a hybrid model, not all one and not all the other, which could take the best of both worlds, right? I mean, everybody has to see their students and their community and their people to figure out what it is. In some cases, I remember for me, teaching in Pirke was very challenging as a heterogeneous to prepare lessons because you now have to prepare for multiple skill levels. So one of the challenges for preparing a heterogeneous model, what typically happened for me was I would often emphasize the lower students in the class. And as a result, the stronger students got very bored, right? And so I would be going over things time and again. I would do a Mishnah. And if 3 kids didn't get it, okay, let's go over the Mishnah again. And you could see the student who already got it on the first time, his eyes rolled to the back of his head. The rabbi was going to go over this again. And believe it or not, students, when they're bored, have the capability of acting out, right? And so that's where sometimes behavior problems became an issue. Some students are very compliant, but other students, as bright as they are, they have a little bit of a tendency to mischief. If rabbi's going over the same thing 95 times, and I'm bored out of my mind, I'm going to start throwing a paper airplane across the thing, and now all of a sudden problems happen. So as a teacher, the heterogeneous model definitely presents a certain difficulty of having to tailor your lesson planning towards both levels so that when the student who got it has maybe an extra thing to do here, why don't you do this extra assignment or pair up with this other student or maybe teach or help another student, whatever it might be. The teacher has to definitely plan for that. In a homogeneous class, not so much. What am I getting at with all of these? Obviously, we're seeing pros and cons, and as parents and educators, we've experienced this with our own children or with our own students. But the thing that I've seen, which sometimes happens in a homogeneous model like we have in Hillel High School, is students sometimes resist challenging themselves, right? What do I mean by that? Students love grades, right? And they like to know that they're getting 100 in everything, right? This is a phenomenon we're familiar with, maybe somewhat, a little bit, right? So everybody looks to grades. And so a student will make the calculation for themselves, and it's not unreasonable. If I go into the honors class, I'm an 85 student because the level is higher, the material is much more challenging. Maybe there's some kind of a curve. Go into the middle track, I'm a 100 student with my eyes closed, right? So students will make the decision. What difference does it make? The college is going to see the same 100, they're going to see the same 85. They're not going to know I was in the higher Gemara class, I was in the lower Gemara class. So I'm going to make the decision to coast. I'll go into the middle track. I'll get my 100 and I'll move on. And that is very painful as a teacher to have students who have told me that outright, explicitly. That's what they're doing. And that's the decision that they're making, because that's not what education is. The purpose of education is for people to grow, for them to challenge themselves, to go out of their comfort zone, to see something that they wouldn't have otherwise seen. And who cares if you get an 85? I'd rather take an 85 in the honors, which means something for me, which means I pushed myself, I worked hard, I learned, than to coast and with my eyes closed get 100. And this is a very difficult conversation that we have with students all the time. We try to make ways of concessions. We give them extra 10 points. We do this, we do that to get them out of the head of the grade, because ultimately we want students to try and excel and to grow and to challenge themselves. Additionally, it sometimes happens that a student will be in the middle track and maybe that's not the right environment for them socially and emotionally. It's not the right environment for them. And we want them to be in the honors class because we feel like that'll be a better social emotional environment for them, but they can't always handle the academics as a result. And now we're struggling, right? What do we emphasize? Do we emphasize the social emotional piece of the student, which in many cases could be more important towards the development and growth as an individual, the types of friends they have, the environment that they're in, the challenge that they go? Or do we just focus purely on the academics and say, this is where you belong academically? So sometimes separating based on that can sometimes rob a student of certain levels of growth that they could be having in the opposite model, and vice versa, right? So this becomes a real major challenge. And what I want to try to bring out over here is the idea of how important it is to always emphasize to ourselves and to our children the importance of having a challenge for yourself, to want to embrace and look at taking a challenge, because it's only through those types of challenges that we can grow as individuals. I'll give you a sports metaphor. I hope I don't lose everybody here, but I think it'll work out. In baseball, you have the minor leagues and the major leagues. When a young player is drafted to a baseball team, they don't thrust him right away in the major leagues. The competition is too stiff. These are people who have honed their skills for many years. So we put them in the minor leagues, but with the intention of wanting to challenge them so that they grow. And every baseball player who's drafted by a baseball team, their goal is to reach the major leagues. If you asked any baseball player who wants to make a career out of baseball, wants to become a professional baseball player, what would you rather? Would you rather be in the minor leagues, the best player, you're hitting 400, you're hitting 50 home runs, 200 RBI, whatever the stats may be, you're out of this world, the best player anyone ever saw in the minor leagues? Or would you rather be on a major league baseball team, but you're a bench player, you sub in, you come out, you're sort of at the end of the line? What would you rather be? There's not a single baseball player who wouldn't say, I'd rather be in the major leagues. Huh? You might want to be, really?
Yeah, close place. So maybe not a player, maybe because it's not like competitive nature, but like I know that my friends are better than me.
Right.
And I think I have to rise to that, and you can't handle that.
Right. Then they show you how much you're going to make, and you're like, I'll take the bench. But by the way, salary makes a difference. The worst player in the major leagues is going to make 3-4 times what the best player in the minor leagues is going to make. Right. And why is that? Because you've gotten to the height of the craft. You are now in a select group of people who are at the height of what they do. There's nobody who does it better than them. Right. And that's really what it is. So if we're assuming people are striving and want to grow and want to get to the top of what it is, it's not just about my personal excelling. It's not just about the statistics that I could put down on paper, but it's about the fact that I reached and am continuing to strive for the highest level of accomplishment that I can. That's what I'm looking for. Some people might feel right.
I'm never going to be
right.
off the bench.
But the question is, so I want to hold that thought for just a minute. Go ahead. Huh? Right. So if you're trying your hardest, then for a person that says it's just not meant for me, right? But if a person can find a role, okay, so this is what we're going to try to talk about. So I want to. True. Okay, so let's figure out where that emotional health is coming in. And is there a way that maybe that emotional health isn't really as healthy as we think it is? So watch. There's a quote in Pirke Abot. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
It's probably, I couldn't remember, I would say tail than to be the head.
Very good.
But
So,
guys, Tanav,
yes,
Rosh,
exactly. Very good. So that's where we're going to our line for Pirke Avot for the day. There's a Mishnah in Pirke Avot in the 4th chapter, the 15th Mishnah. And the Mishnah reads as follows. Rav Matya ben Harash Omer. A rabbi's name is Rav Matya ben Harash says, Hevez zanav la'arayot. Wish to always, strive always to be the tail of the lion, velo rosh l'shu'alim, but not the head of the jackals. What do you think he meant by that? Okay, good. So that's excellent. Rabbeinu Yonah on this Mishnah explains that a person should always surround himself, should always be in touch with the greatest people in whatever particular area he wishes to excel. And for all of us, that's in our Torah and mitzvot, in our study of Torah. If a person wants to excel in their Judaism and in their spirituality, you have to surround yourself with the best. You have to surround yourself with the sages, with the hachamim. You want your friends and people to be others who are on a higher level than you. This way you will look to them as role models, somebody who you are wishing to strive to be like. So even though you're not getting the fanfare, even though you might not be getting the glory, even though you might not feel like, wow, other people are respecting me, says Rav Matya ben Harash, better to be the one respecting others and striving to do that, because that's where your growth is going to come from. That's where the challenge is going to be, than to be the head of the jackals where everyone's looking to you. But in other words, once you're the head of the jackals, there's nowhere to go, right? You're now kind of stuck. You're capped because everyone's looking to you. So you figure, all right, my life is good. I'm exactly where I need to be. I have this group of people who all look up to me, and you become stagnant, right? And you plateau exactly where you are. And most rabbis will tell you, once a person plateaus in Judaism, it's almost impossible to stay plateau. Where do you invariably go? Invariably fall, right? It's almost like a ladder. This is, some people bring this up in Yaakov's dream when he saw the ladder of the Malachim going up and down. He says, Judaism is like a ladder. You're either going up or you're going down. It's very hard. A person is either in a growth mindset. How can I achieve more? How can I elevate myself? And if not, if a person is just saying, oh, I'm good where I am, I'm gonna stay here, right? Imagine staying on a 50-foot ladder exactly in the middle. You're trembling. Nobody can stand there for that long. Eventually, you're gonna have to go one way or the other. And eventually, where does a person go? They sort of come down. So Rav Matya ben Harash is telling us to connect to the highest people, be in the major leagues, because you're gonna learn from those types of people. You're gonna watch their work ethic. You're going to see how they strive to accomplish more and achieve more. And a person is always going to be in a status of growth. Your environment is going to be one where you're challenged and you're looking to grow, not remaining stagnant. The pasuk in Mishleh, which is quoted by Shlomo HaMelech, said by Shlomo HaMelech, he says, Holech et hachamim yahkam. Someone who walks with the sages will become a sage because it'll elevate him. One who's a shepherd of fools, yeroa, he's going to become evil. Why? Because when a person surrounds himself all day long with fools, you're the king of the fools, you eventually become a fool, and you become maybe even worse than that, right? You eventually find yourself, instead of growing, actually, working your way backwards. So I think this is an important thing that I want us to try and analyze and talk about a little bit. How can we apply this type of idea to our lives, trying to always stay in a growth mindset? And maybe even more importantly, why is it that we tend to not do this, right? I think all of us can admit to ourselves that at some point in our lives, we all like to feel like we're the head. To feel like you're the head of the jackals is great. We almost don't even realize that that's where we are, right? We like to stay in our comfort zone. We like to stay within our group of people. And sometimes being the most observant or the most wise or the most whatever in a particular group is very comforting to us. We like to stay there, right? We like to be the minor league player who's the best on the team, because maybe we like, why is that? That's a question. What? Gives us confidence. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's, I think, a very important lesson for us to learn, is that growth happens when we push ourselves out of that comfort zone. When a person is in a resting model, when a person feels like I'm got to where I need to and I can rest and relax, so that's where growth stops. And then a person is never elevating themselves. The rabbis have a very powerful statement. They say, when Yaakov Avinu, the beginning of Parashat Vayeshev, it says, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Kenaan. Yaakov wanted to dwell and sit in Eretz Kenaan. And immediately what happens right after that? His son Yosef is sold. There's turmoil and chaos in his family. And the rabbis say, what? The rabbis say, Bikesh Yaakov leshev b'shalva. Yaakov, after all that he went through with Esav and Lavan and all the headaches with his family and people trying to kill him, after a while he said, Halas, I just want to sit and relax, right? Bikesh Yaakov leshev b'shalva. He just wanted to have peace and tranquility and kind of coast at this point. He had done everything, he had gone through so much turmoil to that point. As she says, no such thing. There's no such thing for hachamim, for people who are sagely, for people who want to be at the pinnacle, for people who are always in a growth mindset. There's no such thing as a moment where you could rest. There's always more that a person could accomplish. There's always more that a person can learn from. There's always another step that a person could try to take in their quest for trying to be the best person that they could be. If anybody ever turned to you, imagine you were having a conversation with somebody, you're talking to them and they said, at whatever age they are, 40, 50, 60, I'm the best person that I could be right now. That's it, right? Imagine someone said something like that. What would you say to them? All right, so then, we have time to bury you? Or like, what should we do? Like, what's the, as long as a person wakes up in the morning and has a breath, how could they ever say, this is the best I am. This is the best person that I'm going to be, right? To live in such a mindset is sad, right? Then what's the point of getting up in the morning? That's how depression sinks in. Where am I going, right? When a person wakes up and says, what am I going to learn today? How am I going to improve myself today? What new thing can I achieve? What new thing can I learn? Where will my struggle be? When a person thinks like that, life becomes exciting. Life becomes worth living. Now you're trying to find room and opportunities for a person to be able to grow. And I think that is, I think it's a very important way to be living, right? It's often said, like people say, in our community, people don't retire, right? They don't like to retire. They're always working, they're always doing, they're always, even if you retire from your business, they're involved in a charity. If they get off the charity, they're helping somebody in school. Everyone, you have to be having something in front of you to say, what's my next challenge? What's the next hurdle I'm going to climb? Because as human beings, we starve for that idea of growth. We want to always know that we're growing and elevating ourselves to another level. So one thing has to do with being in that comfort zone. But at the same time, we always like to feel comfortable. We don't want to branch out. We don't want to do things that that make us feel awkward. The problem is that there's a clash there, because growth, which is what we so desperately crave and seek, only happens when a person is willing to step outside what they know already and say to themselves, let me venture into uncharted waters. Let me open up a new book I never saw before. Let me go to a new rabbi's class that I've never been to before. Let me explore something that I have never thought about and see where that could fit. Maybe I agree, maybe I disagree, but that often makes people uncomfortable, the awkward feeling. And we like to do the things that help us to feel at ease, right? So that's one thing that I think is very important to us. The more we can make ourselves uncomfortable, the more growth we're going to potentially experience. Yeah. Anyone going to say something?
No.
Oh,
The
okay.
growth is learning to be getting comfortable.
With being uncomfortable. All right. It's a good one. Okay, good. That's an excellent thing to keep resonating with us, a mantra to be able to have. I want to say one other thing to Sylvia's point about what makes us sometimes feel like we like to be the head of the jackals, right? Why something not sorry, I didn't I'm giving you the quote. Sometimes I'd rather be right. I will stick with the baseball analogy. I like to be the best player in the minor leagues instead of maybe somewhere else in the other leagues. What might be another reason why we feel that way? If you said confidence, security, right? I'm going to say it a little differently, but you're not going to like the way that I'm going to say it. But I'm going to say it anyway. Ego, right? I mean, and ego, when people hear the word ego, it's a much more negative thing, right? There's a fine line between like self-esteem and self-confidence and ego. But sometimes when we're good at something, right, even though there's more room for us to grow, but we're good at it, we feel like we always have to be the best. We always have to be good at everything, right? You've ever had somebody who everyone tells there's always one person in the group, they're good at everything, right? They're good with their hands, they're handy, they're good at needle pointing, they're good at crocheting, they're good at art, they're good at everything, right? So sometimes we as people, we're good at something and we get a good feeling about that. It's a boost, it's a self-esteem boost for us. We like that. And the idea of venturing into something that we don't know that maybe we might fail at, maybe we might not be as good at, is a very scary feeling for us. So we say to ourselves, I'm comfortable where I am. I'm good at what I do. People like me for this. They respect me for this. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane, right? I like it. Let's stay in my lane. Let's just ride that out so that I can always feel that. But you know what happens at the end, in my opinion, something that could happen later on is then you feel at the end of a person's life, when you look back and you see someone else who accomplished a little more than you or something like that, regret starts to set in. You say to yourself, really? I stopped myself from doing X, Y, and Z that I really somewhere deep down wanted to do, knew I could do, but I stopped it because I was afraid to fail. Because I was afraid of the negative feeling or the self-esteem, lack of self-esteem that I might feel about myself when I wasn't going to be great at that particular thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't push myself to go to the next level. I didn't put myself out of my comfort zone to say to myself, what's the next thing I could do to be able to grow? And that is something that will leave a person with a little bit of an emptiness inside. And that's something I think we would all want to try and avoid. Yes.
Life has many aspects, right? Like you're not at this point in your life, you can't handle challenging yourself like that because then you won't be able to accomplish other aspects of your life.
I think that's reasonable. I think it's a good point. I think that's reasonable. Do you feel comfortable giving an example? Like, or can you think of an example? Like, oh, let's say, for example, a woman wants to be good at being them. They want to emphasize their parenting. They want to be a better mother, and it means right. Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's right.
Also, like, then you have the later parts of your life where your children will be in school and you'll have more time. So when
100%. I think that's, yeah, so I was going to say that, right? That comes down now to a question about prioritizing, right? And balance and finding that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a person saying, right now, I want this to be the most important aspect in my life. I want to emphasize this because it'll give me fulfillment. It'll give me satisfaction. I feel like it's important. Being a mother, being a parent is incredibly important. It's a responsibility. It's something we have. I want to spend more time with my children. I want to make sure they're okay. Maybe I'll get that time back later in life. Maybe I won't. But I know that I want to do this, and that's what it is. There's nothing, absolutely, God forbid, there's nothing wrong with the person saying that, right? I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is whatever it is that we are prioritizing, whatever things we feel we have the ability to do, we should go about doing it. I'm going to take the flip example of that, where a person is, let's say, being a great mother and has an opportunity to balance that together with doing a job, but feels like they might fail at that job, right? They might not be as good as they want, or they feel they can do balance. It's going to take extra work, but something inside of them says to them, my life is good right now. I'm okay. The balance is all right. So I'm not going to push myself. Now, it might turn out good for that person in the end. They might feel comfortable with it, but there also might be a situation where a person looks back on it and says, I really could have grown as an individual from doing that. I probably could have done both, but I was scared. I was nervous, or I didn't want to fail at that job. So I let my ego get the better of me. I didn't want to have that self-esteem knockdown that I was experiencing from my other thing. So I chose not to do it. So that's something that each of us has to figure out. I can't, these are more specific. I'm speaking more general, but each of us has to figure out in our lives where we want to prioritize our different things that we want to do, how many different lanes we want to juggle at the same time. But I think the key that I want to say is when a person feels they have the ability to accomplish something, but it means having to step out of what they're used to or challenge themselves in a different way. And it might end up causing us a little bit of a self-esteem downgrade, right? At least in the beginning, if we don't, pursue it a little bit more, we should try not to let that deter us, right? When I talk to a student who I tell them, I say, no, don't worry. You're going to go to the honors class and your first test probably be a 75. Probably will be, right? Because it's going to be challenging for you, right? But don't worry, take 2-3 more tests. By the end of the year, you'll be in the 90s. How much more so would I look at that student at the end of the year when that student comes to me in June and says, Rabbi, I went into the honors class. I got a 75 on my first test. I got a 78 on my second test. I got an 83 on my third test. And by the end of the year, I got a 95. Do you know what kind of satisfaction that student will have how much that student is boosted, how that will change them for the rest of their life, you can't even measure it. As opposed to another student come to me, Rabbi, I got 100 on my report card. To be honest with you, I value the other one. I'll value the other one's work and what he did, even if he doesn't get to the 95, because he worked at something, he challenged, and he'll have so much more satisfaction, and he'll learn things along the way in that process that the other person robbed himself of because he just took it easy. That's where I think is something that, yeah, look, I'm not saying it's for everybody, right? And that's something that you have to analyze child by child, student by student, case by case, right? But I think what I want us to try to be alerted to is the fact that sometimes in life, whatever stage we're at, whether we're a student, whether we're a mom, whether we're a grandma, whatever it might be, there's things that are going to come to our plate where we have an opportunity to try something new and push ourselves. And in that moment, it's going to mean us for a period of time being the tail of the lion, right? It's going to mean a struggle. It's going to mean we're going to fail. It's going to mean we're not going to do it right the first 10, 20, 30, how many times it is, depending on what we're talking about. But you want to keep pushing yourself and saying to yourself, I want to be the tail of the line. I want to be the best. I want to be with the best. I want to try and learn from the best. And even if I never actually make it, at least I could say I was part of that group. That Rambam says something fascinating on this Mishnah. He says, in the end of the day, the tail of the lion is still called what? Part of the lion. He's still part of the lion. And the head of the jackal, even though it's the head, is still amongst the jackals, right? It's still in that group. So even if it means you're at the quote unquote bottom of the top, we should all keep telling ourselves, I'd rather be at the bottom of the top than be at the top of the bottom. Yeah.
I heard something about it that sacrifice is a whole like don't sacrifice or like get yourself uncomfortable whatever, then you're not going to mature.
100%.
And then that leads to not having confidence and things like that.
Right.
You have to work hard and sacrifice.
Right. No, it doesn't have to be. It's logic. It makes a lot of sense. Now, it's okay, by the way, I just want to point out, it's okay sometimes to, if you see that a child or ourselves are struggling with our self-confidence, it's okay to give them something that you know they're capable of doing to kind of boost them up, right? I'm not saying we always have to be giving everybody something that they're going to fail at, right? That's going to drive them insane. It's okay to start by doing something, you give a student who's struggling in math, you throw a couple of problems in there at the beginning that they're going to get right before you get to the problems that they might have a little bit more difficulty with. This way you build their confidence a little bit. But if you just keep giving him the same problems that he already knows and you never throw anything else at him that he's going to have to try to struggle with, he's just going to end up being like that for the rest of his life, right? So we have to try and figure out clever ways, knowing ourselves, knowing our children, knowing our students, of how to keep pushing and pulling a little bit, boosting their self-confidence while at the same time kind of challenging them. And I've found sometimes in the heterogeneous model of classes, that's something that's there. The students who are struggling, they look to the highest and they say, I want to be like that. They try to push themselves and they know. Whereas when we separate them, sometimes everyone's just like, well, Rabbi, I'm in the lower class, so put it all, right? This is what it is. And, whatever, leave me alone, right? And that's unfortunate. That's not something. And that's where I think someone said it before. You have to have a good teacher who, even within some of the lower tracks, still is finding a way to give them something more, to push their expectations. You got to know where they are and then give them one little step up. I'll give one other example and then I'll close. A lot of times we have conversations with both parents and students about spending a year in Israel, like to go ahead and learn. And there's always hesitations. There's always reservations that both parents and students have. And rightfully so, right? You're sending your child away to a foreign country for a full year. And, what are they going to be when they come back? And what's going to happen? And I'm going to miss them. And there's so many things. And there's parents here that I see who have done this, who have sent their children. There's always a certain level of fear. One of the things that I find that we're fearful of, both student and parent, is they're fearful of growth. They're actually afraid to elevate themselves and push themselves. Sometimes in the back of our mind, we're actually nervous to grow as people. Why do you think that might be? And you could use the exact example that I've said, because it's a good one. Yeah. I'm looking at you because I know you'll say something. Very uncomfortable when it's just silent.
It's all the things we talked about: the ego, the stability, the knowing that you're comfortable in your own space, and it's change. People
Right.
don't really like change.
That's
They're
yeah.
not good with it.
Right. They're not good with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, change
Okay, that's a big one. That's a huge one, right? People are nervous to grow because then what's going to happen with my friends? What's going to happen with my circle? The students, when we tell the student, you should really go to Israel, you're going to have a great time. Well, what's going to happen with my friends? It's one of the first things that they'll always tell to us. What am I, when I come back? Can I still be friends with those same people when I come back? And they don't want to lose their circle of friends. Who's going to be my friends? Who am I going with? The social pressure of what's going on around us when it comes to change is very hard, because if I'm changing and my circle of people who I'm very comfortable with maybe are not changing, what is that going to do now to my social emotional state? How's that going to happen? That's something we're nervous about. Yeah, so I go. Please.
I know with Israel it's different because you're literally away for such a long time. So the growth is like much more apparent when you come home. As it's like when you're here, okay, so every week you go to a rabbi's place, but you're still around the same people. So like the growth seeing isn't as noticeable, and everyone kind of gets used to it like as you go along. But
Yeah.
in Israel, I feel like there's more fear because it's like, oh, I'm gonna come back and
Right.
no one told me for so long, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you went from 0 to 100 so fast.
It's like losing weight, right? When a person, like when your spouse is losing weight and like they're losing like a half a pound of weight. No, I'm sorry, I'm just my left side. No, right? When a spouse is losing weight and like they lose like a half a pound this week, a half a pound that week, and like you almost don't realize your spouse is losing weight, you almost don't even realize the transformation that's going on. Then somebody sees them like 8 months, they haven't seen them, like, wow, you lost a lot of weight. I'm like, huh? Lost a lot of weight? What are you talking about? They look exactly the same. That's because you're seeing them every day, right? When you're seeing somebody every single day, even if they're losing weight, you're getting used to it. You see your kids every single day, 100%. And then all of a sudden, somebody who hasn't seen them in a year, in 2 years, wow, your kid shot up, he got so tall, he got there. So growth by nature is supposed to be very slow, supposed to be incremental, and it's almost supposed to be, to a degree, I hate to use this word, like almost unnoticeable, right? It's almost supposed to be something that you look subtle. That's a better word. I like that word. Subtle. Something that you look back on 6 months after you've done it, and you realize, wow. I learned this when I first went to Tawil. I had a very big problem. I wouldn't start learning a particular thing unless I knew that I could finish it, right? I wouldn't start learning a particular book or a particular set of laws or something unless I knew I could finish it. When you think like that, you prevent yourself from learning a lot of things, because there's a lot of things that are so massive that you're unable to finish, right? I never started learning the Rambam's laws because the Rambam's Mishneh Torah has 14 gigantic books. There's hundreds of thousands of laws in it. So I never started because I said, I'm not going to finish it, right? What's going on over here? And the Kollel taught me when I was there and I was learning to just do one halakha a day, 2 halachot a day, something very, very, very small. And I did it and we kept going. And then you look back 5 years later, 10 years later, you finished 5, 6 books. You're like, how did I accomplish that? How did I do that? Because the growth is subtle, it's small, and it's meant to be when you look back. That's true growth. When you're changing so quickly, so dramatically in the snap of the fingers, generally speaking, that growth has a harder time. I can't say, it doesn't always happen this way, has a harder time being longer lasting, right? Sustainable change, right? I mean, I've been on every diet that ever existed in the universe. Every single one that's drastic, you'll lose weight very quickly, and then you'll go right back, because it's not sustainable growth. It's not healthy growth the way it's meant to be. And we could apply that to every single area of our lives. So definitely we often feel we're afraid to grow. We're afraid to grow because what will people say about us? What will happen to my group of friends? What will happen to other people? We're nervous if we're already in a comfortable state of Rosh Rashu Alim. We're very nervous to bump ourselves up into the Zanav La'arayot, because what's that group about Arayot, those lions? What are they going to be like? It's lions, right? It's a scary thing. So we're nervous about growth. We see our daughter start to make a certain change, right? The daughter starts to put on a skirt on Shabbat, and the mothers are like freaking out. They're like, what's going on over here? What's that? Because they're nervous not only about their own change, they're also nervous about their child's change, right? Is my child going to be? And it's always with a good heart. It's never coming from a bad place, has v'shalom. But there's always these fears that we have, that we don't want always people to grow because we're nervous about what's going to happen. And that's something that we have to also try to encounter and tell ourselves not to be afraid of that growth. That growth is good. They'll find a way to find themselves in another circle. I always never want, in my opinion, to stunt somebody from growing and being a better version of themselves. If you believe that it's the right thing for them to do in the right way that they're doing it, If you tell them, but don't do this because of whatever it is, you've taught them to exit themselves from a growth mindset. And that will have very devastating consequences for them later on in life when they're looking to make the best person that they could be. They've been told, don't always be the best. Just blend in, just fit in, just be like everybody else. That is, to me, a very damaging message to send to ourselves and to send to our children and to send to other people around us. Instead, we should be telling them positive, be the best you can, grow, do better. Don't, be kind. If you are doing something that's going to elevate yourself and the people, try to bring them with you, try to influence them, try to impact them. When there's no person, you be the person. Don't worry, they'll follow you, right? They'll follow you. Person wants to stop eating out, very nervous about how that's going to play out with the group of friends that they have. I can't go to dinner with them anymore. I can't do this anymore. Don't stop yourself. We'll work it out. You'll figure it out. Someone will come by. You'll find another group or whatever it is. You have to think about it reasonably. Again, every case is different. I don't want to paint things with broad strokes, but never, in my opinion, stop yourself from doing something that you believe is right, that you believe is good, that is a principle of your life, because you're afraid to enter into another level or something else, or it's going to obligate you, or it's going to alienate you or something like that. Be mindful of what's going on around you, but never stunt growth, and especially in our children, never stunt growth. Keep them in that zanav la'arayot type of mindset. Keep them pushing the bar forward, and I think we'll hopefully see a lot of growth in ourselves and in our children to become the best versions of ourselves that we could definitely be. Questions or comments or thoughts? Okay, yeah, yes.
That was something like that he started to and Rabbi and something that he never opened the book to learn. And he started to go to class with Rabbi Hillary. And I think it was not easy for him, especially being around people who might all be more learned than he was, but he pushed himself.
And for an 80-year-old man at that stage of his life to make the decision to probably sit around the table with dozens of people who are younger than him, who probably all think he's invincible and he's God and can do nothing wrong, to sit around the table and be vulnerable in that situation is a very big deal, right? That's a huge musar point. That's what we said. People are afraid to grow because it makes them feel vulnerable. It makes them have to do something that makes us feel vulnerable. Nobody wants to feel that way. But when you make yourself vulnerable, that's how you're going to be able to show, become the best person that you could be. And that's a tremendous musar point that he showed. I can't see who it is in the back. Sally? No, Vicky, sorry.
And not being a tailor, keeping on doing things with happy intention, but taking on too much and not doing everything the right way.
But wouldn't that be the revert, meaning that you're saying, you're saying, okay, you're thinking like on Rosh Hashanah? It's interesting that you brought that up. I didn't mention it. Chacham Ovadia brings it in his commentary over here that every Rosh Hashanah we eat the tongue, right, or the head, whatever everybody does in their own family, and we say Yeh lerosh v'lo lezanav. We should be the head and not the tail, right? So how does that fit with what we're saying over here? When we say Rosh over here, you know what we're really saying? We want to be the head of the lion. We want to be at the top of everything, right? That's what we're saying, and not to be the zanav, not to be the back. But and you want to say that means we should focus more on. They're not thinking enough. Right. Right. So they call that the jack of all trades, but master of none. Right. But you want to try and master something, is what you're saying. 100%. Everything that you're doing should come with good thought, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. No question about it. Sure.
I feel like with growth, it's not attaching yourself to a certain idea, but a certain core value. Like to attach yourself to be resilient, not to be the best makeup artist there is. Because I can't always be a makeup artist. Like what happens when I don't know, when I can't be a makeup artist anymore, but like that was my goal, and like that can lead to sadness, or like I can't explain it. Like
You want to say focus your attention more on like attributes or midot that are going to help you in all different circles as you're in the process of doing something.
Right, like focus on the resilience instead of the end goal.
Right. Definitely whenever we set, this is I think a different topic, but I definitely when we set goals for ourselves, what we want to achieve, sometimes we're too focused on the thing itself and the end game instead of the process of how we got there. Right. So the process is also very, very important of what we needed to overcome, the resilience factor, failures that occur along the way. That's probably a topic for a whole class in and of itself. Definitely focusing in on those midot that we could acquire through our goal-oriented mindset and our growth mindset that will help us to balance ourselves in all different areas, right? I'm sure whether you're a makeup artist or a hairdresser or a designer or whatever it is, if you're mindful of what you're learning in the process, it could transfer over to being a mother and a teacher and a friend in any other capacity. If we're always looking to learn, if we're always learning from everything, that's how we'll be able to make those crossings from one thing to the next, 100%. Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Sally, again. Have a great day.